It's time for the 2015 football season to start, which means it's time for Keys to the Game, brought to you by Wentz Orthodontics. Brian Jensen, John Harris, Chris Level, the Texas Tech Sports Network radio crew with you. The Sam Houston State Bearcats coming into town for the season opener for the Red Raiders. And, you know, when you talk about season openers and you talk about things that are keys to a game, you're always kind of reaching just a little bit, because the season opener is always the time that you're just not sure exactly what you're going to see. Remember last year in the season opener. But, hey, we got to do three keys, basically, so let's get started, John.
You know, and I'll start with something Cliff Kingsbury has talked about since the end of last season, too, and that's the receiver play for this team. This is a program that has built a reputation on throwing the football and great receivers, and I think a year ago that part of the Red Raiders game on offense was very inconsistent. Yes, Devin Lauderdale or Jakeem Grant or Ian Sadler or Reggie Davis or Dylan Cantrell had big games individually, but they didn't do it every week. And one thing they didn't do particularly well was catch the ball at times, a lot of drops, and really not a lot of yards after catch much of the time. And remember, this has been an offense that throws the short ball, turns that into a big play. Didn't see that much. And this is really something that we could say every week. Receivers have to be consistent, turn the little plays into big plays, and that does a lot of things for the offense. It'll open up the running game that Chris will talk about some. It also keeps the defense on the sideline resting too. So I think just the lack of consistent receiving game a year ago was a big issue for this team.
And you didn't even mention one of the guys that may have been as consistent as any of them at the top of the list, Bradley Marquez, who's no longer here. So a great point there. Running game, that's where you're going on this? Is what he just kind of threw you out there.
He did. I think what John is hinting at too is kind of what I'm talking about. Is last year you really just lacked bread and butter. What was your identity? Where could, you know, when things got tough, where could you go? Wasn't a receiver. Sometimes it was DeAndre, but in the red zone, he wasn't, didn't produce enough. But to me, I think early on in this game tomorrow, you will, or today, depending on when you're watching this, I think you'll see this veteran offensive line really try to establish things. They're going to obviously try to keep their quarterback clean, but I think they really want to pave the way for this deep stable of running backs. And maybe not necessarily you're going to be knowing Texas Tech this year as a running football team, but I think they really want to lean on that aspect of their offense and go to it more often than not. Last year you get behind in a lot of games, you have to bail out on it. But this year I really think that DeAndre Washington and Justin Stockton is a guy that I'm as excited to watch as anybody. I think they will play heavily into the outcome versus Sam Houston State.
Kind of expected you guys would go with defense or offense, so I'll go with defense because that's what I'm really excited to see when the Red Raiders step on the field, and they better, because against a Sam Houston team that's pretty darn good in that other division and a team that's going to come in moving the football very well. They've got a lot of returners back. They play a very fast-paced game too, and so I guess you could, in a keys to the game, you could talk about the defensive line, but you could talk about the linebacker. You could talk about let's just talk about the defense, because I think overall it's going to be very interesting to see how this works, how Fehoko comes in and fits in, how the secondary, which is very experienced but still very young, how that all works out, and then the linebacking core, who fits into the positions that you're really just not sure who's going to fit into the positions. So the defense kind of coming together early, I think, is going to be a key to this game, and making sure that they do something they haven't done in years, and that a Gibbs defense supposedly does. It's turnovers, takeaways. That's right. Yeah. So I think that's also a big key.
And let's hope this is the 1,000th game tomorrow. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. Let's hope that there's more points scored in this one than there was in the very first Texas Tech game.
Yeah.
0-0 tie.
I thought you were going to say, I hope we score as many as the games are. Well, that would be just man, I better get the lozenge if that's the case. Right. In any event, we know you're going to want to watch the game, but be sure to listen as well. Tune in to the Texas Tech Sports Network radio broadcast, if you will, and we look forward to talking to you next week on Keys to the Game, brought to you by Wentz Orthodontics.